This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now,
welcome to the Extra Point. I'm Cheryl Ross, the Next Steps and Discipleship Pastor here at Southridge Church, and I'm with Scott Beha, our lead pastor. And we are in week 4 of our series, Silent but Deadly. And this past Sunday, you talked about the topic of lust, and you really shared how, purity is not just what we do, but it's what we want to do. So, yeah. Pastor Scott, if you want to share a little bit more about that and what you mean by that.
Yeah, so we took one little sample size from the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew chapter 5, 27 and 28 to talk about that. But you can see this idea throughout all of the Sermon on the Mount. So even the passage right before this one, Jesus talks about hate and murder, where it's like, hey, sometimes we act like, oh, well, I didn't actually act on it, so therefore it was okay. And that's why Jesus goes, no, it's not good enough that you make it through your day without killing someone. If you even hate someone in your heart, he goes on to say, even if you call someone a fool, which isn't really the same connotation we use the word fool now, but like if you were to say something insulting to someone, like he goes, that's the same thing as murdering them as far as that the kingdom standard is concerned. Like it's the same thing. And so then he goes on the same thing with lust. He goes, you've heard that they said don't commit adultery, and like you would think that would be an easy command, like, hey, here's the standard for sexuality, stay within this. And I shared those stats on Sunday that like even that seems to be difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then Jesus goes on and raises the ante and goes, yeah, but I say don't even like have those thoughts of doing that. Don't even let stuff like that have a place in your mind, because I think the reason why is Jesus knows ultimately what we want to do will end up being what we end up doing, even if it's far down the road. So like, I think a lot of people don't deal with issues like this because they're like, well, I'm not really acting out on it or anything like that. You're not in the moment, but look at those adultery stats. I bet all of those people that find themselves, outside of their marriage, engaging in sexual activity, it all started with a thought. It all started with a look, then it started with a thought, and then down the road, like it ended up that thought took them further than they even thought was possible for them. Because nobody on their wedding day is standing at the altar going, you know what, one day I'm going to destroy this. One day I'm going to ruin this. Yeah. Nobody goes into marriage with that mindset whatsoever. What happens is they don't mind their thoughts well enough, and eventually that thought takes root and it ends up being an action. I think that's even really, if you go and look at 1 Timothy chapter 1, it talks about how, desire ultimately will take you that direction. That is the ultimate. Like, I don't think people, unless they have really, really serious, like a really serious, like sex addiction, most people don't just wind up in bed with people that they're not married to. If they're married on a whim, like they didn't just go out to Chili's and was like, oh, look what I just did. Like it's normally something that's happened over a long period of time, where you've done it enough in your mind that eventually the action just becomes the natural outflow of that. And then there's other places where Jesus talks about this whole idea, like don't think just because you don't act on something, the very fact that it's your desire. I mean, so it's not just in the murder and the hate and the lust and the adultery and all of this, but he talks about this in multiple different places. And I think it comes to that point that I was making Sunday, this was an eye-opening. I heard this from John Bevere. John Bevere has an incredible YouTube series. John Bevere has an incredible YouTube series called like How to Quit Porn or something. I watched the whole thing for preparation for this sermon, and he was talking about how most Christians still operate like they're under the law, meaning like the only reason why they don't do certain things is because the law said not to.
Right.
And I know that like in the version of Christianity I grew up with and what like most people might listen to that and go, yeah, what's the big deal? They're not doing it. Like if they're not doing it, why is that such a big deal? And he goes, well, the problem is that they're being constrained from the wrong place. They're being constrained by the law. And 1 Corinthians 15:56 says that the law is what gives sin its power. And so, like, I know in my own personal journey, no matter what the issue is, because I have operated as if I'm still under the law, I did not realize I was sitting there feeding the very thing that was actually trying to destroy me, because I wasn't finding freedom in none of those. And I kept going, God, why are you not taking this away? Why are you not taking this away? Why are you not fixing this, God? And well, the only reason I was constrained in certain things is because I thought I had to.
Right.
And again, it's good that people constrain themselves, but if it doesn't come from the right place, eventually you'll turn on yourself and you'll end up doing what it is. This is why Paul, I believe it's Romans 7, has this big conversation. Yeah, it is Romans 7. Paul goes, why do I do all the stuff that I don't want to do, and I do not do what I want to? Like, he's like, it's like everything is mixed up, everything is flipped upside down. How in the world? And he ends that whole passage like with how a lot of people feel about themselves in regards to sin is, what a wretched man am I? Like, how am I supposed to fix this? And the way that you fix it is you have to beg God to change your desire, so that way what you desire lines up with what he finds to be righteous. You can only do behavior modification for so long before it will get the best of you. And behavior modification is not freedom whatsoever. Jesus came so the way we would be free. John Bevere, in that YouTube series, he tells this story about a guy that he got saved, and this guy, when he got saved, smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day. He was an avid smoker, 4 packs a day. And so when he got saved, he wanted to be free of that. So he would pray and pray and pray and pray and pray for God to help him to stop smoking. And it didn't happen. He could not break free of this. And so he said this guy was getting really frustrated. But one night, his church was having a big revival event, and he invited a friend to come with him. And he came. This guy comes. He was a 2-pack a day smoker, gets saved, and the very next day is set free from the addiction to nicotine. And now this one guy is super upset with God. He goes, God, I've been asking you for years now to set me free of this, and you're not doing it. This guy gets saved yesterday, and he's free today. He goes, what is the problem? And that guy said, God literally answered him. He said, because you still like it. Like, you've been praying all these years for God to set you free of smoking cigarettes, but you still like it, so I can't set you free.
Right.
Like, you keep running back into it. And that was the thing John Bevere talked about also. Like, he had this moment where he was completely set free from his lust issue. And he said what happened was he was at a condo down in Florida, and he was doing this prayer and fasting because he wanted to be free of pornography and lust and all this, and nothing was happening. And he gets out and he goes outside, and he comes like face to face with a lady that's in like a bikini or whatnot. And he got so angry because right in the middle of this fast and this time where he's trying to get God to take away this lustful desire, like, it felt like the enemy like threw this lady in a bikini right in his face. And he got so angry in that moment that finally his desire inside him changed, and he now was repulsed by the things that repulsed God, and he was finally set free. He's finally set free, because that's actually the goal. Is because one of the things that me and you talked about that we wanted to mention was, like, there was a question for small groups about how do you live in a world that is inundated with all this sexual imagery. How is it even realistic to think that you could live lust free in this type of world? And the answer is yes, because when you are repulsed by what repulses God, when you hate what God hates, when you hate these things, then what happens is you can come face to face with them and be unaffected by it. And that's actually the goal. Because if we try to live in a way where we have to shield ourselves from absolutely everything, then we're not free again.
Right.
If now I got to just walk around town with my head down so I don't come in contact with a beautiful woman or a guy with big biceps or whatever your fancy is. Like, that's not free
Right.
whatsoever. You have to be able to come face to face and in that woman or in that man see them as a child of God and be totally unaffected by it.
Yeah.
Because you hate what God hates and you love what God loves.
Right.
Because you can't just bury your head in the sand. Like
Right.
this, it literally is. I mentioned on Sunday, like Hardee's, like when they were selling thick burgers, like for using like half-dressed people to do it.
Right.
So like, who would have ever thought you're watching a burger joint like commercial and it's like boom right in your face?
Right.
So you can't get away from it. Sure, you can minimize certain things, and you absolutely should. We absolutely should minimize our exposure. But like, am I supposed to just tell my kids, hey, I'm on this purity thing, so we're not going to the pool anymore? Right? Because there's going to be ladies in bathing suits, and there's, of course not. You can't live your life like that. You have to live your life in such a way to where you are able to see the image of God within them, and you see, man, that's somebody's daughter. That's someone that God loves. How could I ever objectify a person like that if I'm supposed to love them like God loves them? Like, that's what has to happen. That's why I say it's absolutely reasonable to think that you can live in a culture that's totally, intoxicated with sexual imagery, because it's not about what's happening out there. It's about what's happening inside of you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so powerful to just give you the tools of like how you can just shift the way that you pray about something, because instead of just praying for God to, take this away from you, now you're praying like, God, change my desire. And I think that is a huge key in it because, we've all probably prayed for things that obviously we didn't get or shouldn't have gotten.
Yeah.
And sometimes just that knowing how to pray for something is extremely powerful. So I think that's so good.
That's what John Bevere talks about in that YouTube series. What one of the things that clicked for him was when he finally started praying, God, help me to love what you love and hate what you hate.
Yeah.
Like, that's what changed. His desire finally changed. And then, he used to watch pornography. He couldn't even watch it anymore because he was so repulsed by it. He now saw it for the evil that it was, and it had no effect on him. So therefore he was free from it because he now he hated it like God hated it.
Yeah.
And it was through praying consistently that God would change what he desires. And that is the key to freedom. And this like, we're talking about lust, but like you can fill anything in the blank whatsoever. Like whatever it is that you want to quit, whatever you want to change, until the pain of staying the same is so much, you will not go and change.
Yeah. Well, I thought about that even with like exercising and working out and eating right.
Yes.
Because I think, several of us are trying to do that now. And I think I got to that point where I was like, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like now I have this, even though, I'm tired from getting back from Ecuador and everything else. Like I didn't like 7 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, whatever it was when I started, I would not have necessarily wanted to get up and go to the gym this morning. But now, like, I feel like that desire has changed. And I'm like, I wanted to get up and go to the gym this morning. And so it does make a big difference in a lot of different areas of your life. And so I think that's so important. And I loved how you talked about how like we can think that it's not hurting anybody, but when you look at the stats and when you look at the things behind it, as far as like even pornography goes, like knowing and realizing that it's not always people who want to do that are doing that you're watching, that you're doing that stuff, I think is really important to hear. But I think when you get to that point and you realize, oh, that is someone's, daughter, that is someone's mom, possibly, that is someone who is like made in the image of God and being objectified in such a way, like I think that changing and shifting that mindset, you talked about it, I think the first week of the series, how it really begins with changing our thoughts. And that's what we see within this as well, is that like even within this, like it's changing the thought process and the way you view things, the way you think about things, that changes all of that. And so I thought about that within, what you were talking about, what you were sharing on Sunday as well. But on Sunday, you talked a lot about how, living under the law, and you mentioned it briefly, but about how the law is what gives sin its power, and what true freedom really sounds like. And so let's talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that we see this most clearly, like with if you have ever been in a position of influence with a child, or maybe when you were a child or a teenager, you had this same experience, that the presence of being told what not to do only led you to do it all the more. Right? Like for me, all the stuff that my parents said, no, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that. That's the first thing that I wanted to do, because that's how law and rules work. It's like, because humanity is rebellious at heart, when there's a law or a rule put in place, our natural tendency is to go and break it as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And so this is why the law gives sin its power. And it's not, and again, like Paul talks about this, it's not that there was anything wrong with the law. The law was perfect, but the law was there to show humanity just how sinful they really were. The law essentially illuminated humanity to, hey, everything that is in you points towards the wrong direction. So therefore you need something beyond the law to set you free and change you. This is why, like, the New Testament talks about the law as like a tutor. Like it was bringing the people up to a point to where the real thing could come, and that's Jesus. And in Jesus now we have the means by which, through the power of the Holy Spirit living in us, to actually have what's inside of us point a different direction. The law, Paul says, the law was powerless to do that. The law can never change a heart. The law could only change behavior, but we didn't realize in the process of that, it was making us all the more prone to break the law. But now the Holy Spirit comes and is able to actually change what you want to do, not just what you do. And all of a sudden, you can actually be free to be exactly who God made you to be.
Yeah. That's so good. Yeah. I think, man, I get excited when I think about the kind of freedom that can come. And I know you talked about how there are several things that we can do, some action steps that we can do to help us become free, and how you said that lust feeds on secrecy and starves in transparency. I think it is such a scary thing for a lot of people to do, but the adverse thing of that is, like, if you stay in that secrecy and you allow fear to keep you back from doing some of these steps, then it's only going to keep you trapped in that, bound up in that even longer. And so you've got one reality where you stay bound in a sin that you want freedom from, or you have freedom. And so some of these things that you shared of what we can do, and you cited some resources that I want you to kind of hit back on, and we can put even in the notes here or the description here as well. But I think these things are not just action steps for you to do, like, in hopes to be set free, but I believe that these are action steps that will set you free if you actually do them. And so the first one you talked about was wise boundaries.
Yeah.
You talked about, filters, accountability software. I think you maybe mentioned one of those resources here. Or is it in the next one?
Yeah, I think one of the most prominent ones that I know there's 3 or 4 major ones. The best place that you can go is puredesire.com, and they have a list of resources from, they have 3 or 4 different accountability apps that are on there. They also have counseling and rehabilitation requests and referrals out there. Puredesire.com also has small groups that you can join if you're someone that needs help and freedom in this area. They also have a podcast that you can listen to. Like they have a whole ministry where you can actually set up these small groups in your church for people, because I said it yesterday. I know this, and you're the Next Steps in Discipleship pastor. You oversee our groups, and you would probably agree with this. In most of our groups, dealing with this sort of issue is just not really going to be possible.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things that not many people will have the guts to come forward that, hey, this is my issue. And then so many people are like, it is a sin with a stigma, kind of turned off by. You're like, oh gosh, I feel uncomfortable around him or her or whatever. Like, so Pure Desire has these small groups that you can join, and if there's enough people locally, then you can actually have like an in-person group. If not, you can meet online. That is like, from what I could tell, that's like a one-stop shop that if you want to find a bunch of different resources, podcasts, articles, books, counseling, referrals, small groups, the accountability apps that are available, the best practices of how to deal with this, that is a treasure trove of resources on that one website. Another one where I did get some information. Now, this is a secular website. This is not coming from a Christian perspective whatsoever, but fightthenewdrug.com is this is a secular website that is all about the dangers of pornography use, because it's not just Christians or people of faith anymore that are recognizing how dangerous and this is for individuals and communities and for our world in general. Like everyone is beginning to see it across the board. Like this is not a good thing. It is leading to really, really bad outcomes, and something has to be done. So fightthenewdrug.org is a secular site that you can go to get a bunch of information as well. And I believe there's another ministry, Triple X Church. They named that on purpose. That way, when certain people, if you were going to go look for explicit sites on the internet and you just typed in XXX or whatnot, this church ministry would come up that their main focus is to help people get free from pornography addiction and things like that. They also have a bunch of resources. Now, they are a group that, just from what I know of them, I don't like rubber stamp everything that they say and do, but they are a resource. And again, like I said on Sunday, this is one of those situations where if you're a person that struggles in this area, that you cannot tackle this issue lightly. Like you have to be willing to go and do whatever it takes. It really is likened to someone that is bound up with alcohol or drug addiction. Like, because especially like pornography use affects your brain so much like drugs, it does behave a lot like addiction. And a lot of people have taken it as far as being an addiction probably at this point, to where I know it might sound crazy to like, hey, rehab is an option, or counseling at the very least is an option, or like putting in an app on your phone that costs $15 a month seems crazy. But it's like, what are you willing to do to get free? Like that's the question. What are you willing to do to get free? Like when people want to get rid of drugs and alcohol, they literally will leave their family for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years to get it done. So it's like, how much do you want to be free? Because that's going to be the big question. That's going to be the thing. Like, if you want to get free, there's a way out. But I'm telling you, it's not the easy way. Like, it just going the easy way. Like, you may like trying to do it on your own. Sure, you might go a month without having issues. You might go 2 months. At some point, it will come back if you do not go the full way with it and handle it the way that it needs to.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think we know, like, we probably know some people who we've seen this kind of cycle where they're okay for a while and then, they get tripped up again. And I think that's what's important is, like, when you desire that more than you desire this, then you're going to go those steps. You're going to put some wise boundaries up. You're going to use accountability. You're going to do counseling or rehab. You're going to change your inputs. And you won't be afraid to run away.
Too many, they wait till, well, now my marriage is ruined, so now I'd like to get some help. Okay, you can get help, but that's not going to fix all the damage that you've already done. So get help before the damage is so bad.
Right.
that you can't recover from it.
Yeah.
Like you can recover personally, but like you might not get your family back.
Right.
Right. So like make changes, take steps while there's still time. And so many people wait too long to go and deal with it. And then the damage is done. And you're like, well,
yeah,
like now I'm better, but look at what it cost me in the process because I didn't go and deal with what I needed to deal with up front.
Right.
And that for me is a really like scary reality that some people will live. You know, look, if you don't like tell somebody, start taking steps. Like, look, if you have to wait till you get found out, you're already starting behind the ball.
Yeah, damage is definitely already done by
when
them.
when you can come forward and disclose yourself, like, hey, this is an issue for me, then that's when you're able to minimize the damage. Even though there will be damage incurred, no doubt about it. But when you're the one, if you have to be forced into it, it won't seem as genuine of a decision to those around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe, I think you started off with wise boundaries in the very beginning as that first step, but I think wisdom in all of this is important because you may not come and be able to confess to your entire small group, but there may be someone within your small group who you could go to and trust, who that you have that kind of level with. And so even, just exercising wisdom and knowing who to go to, what to do, how to do that, I think is important. So praying for wisdom is probably like a big key in here too. Because again, like you said, like, hey, if you need to delete social media apps off your phone, delete them off your phone, like set up those things, be wise in what you're doing, what you're putting in, who you're hanging out with. All those things are, require some level of wisdom, I believe. And so we will put the resources up, those couple websites, we'll put those in the description for you guys. And again, we are just praying for freedom for you all from this and other possible sinful desires or things that you have. We know that God's going to do a great thing if you actually take the steps to do the things that are necessary in order to be freed. But we're going to be back here again next week. We'll be talking about unforgiveness. So we look forward to that conversation as well. And we can't wait to see what God does through another sermon in this topic.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.